Mike is a bear hunting guide in Kodiak Island, southern Alaska, home to the world's largest brown bears. He also hunts smaller animals to supplement his income by selling furs. During bear season, thrill-seeking tourists come to hunt. Mike earns commissions by guiding them, but this year, cancellations have reduced his earnings. To make ends meet, he turned to hunting foxes, specifically larger ones with fluffy fur highly valued by collectors, worth 3 times that of regular foxes. When the tide is low, foxes scour the beach for food. Observing this, Mike spotted a silver fox emerging from willow trees. Typically, he shoots within 100 yards, but today he took a chance from further because the pelt could sell for up to $200. Unfortunately, he missed, and despite a follow-up shot, the fox escaped. Disappointed, Mike decided to try his luck elsewhere. Walking on, he found fresh tracks. Knowing foxes are clever, he opted for an ambush over pursuit. He built a barrier with cut brush, concealed behind it as foxes couldn't see over it. He then simulated the sound of a wounded rabbit with a whistle, a sound that attracts foxes from afar. A fox appeared, and as it approached, it hesitated, sensing danger. Seizing the opportunity, Mike adjusted his position and shot decisively. The fox fell but managed to crawl back into the bushes. Following the blood trail, Mike found the dead silver fox, picked it up by the neck, and carried it out of the bushes. He secured it by tying a rope around its hind leg and hanging it from a tree. With daylight fading, Mike quickly skinned the fox, admiring the pelt once it was off. Satisfied with the $200 worth, he leisurely headed home, though his hunting days were far from over. The next day, Mike set out again with his gear. Today's target was not foxes, but fresh meat to sustain him through the winter. Among Alaska's delicacies, mountain goats are top-rated, but they dwell on steep rocky mountains, making them extremely hard to reach. For this reason, Mike hired a plane piloted by Peter, an experienced aviator. After loading the supplies, they took off, and following hours of flight, finally reached their destination. Peter would return in 3 days, so Mike had to be back by then regardless of his hunting success. Mike entered the woods, looking for an open area to set up camp for the night and prepare for hunting the next morning. He cleared the ground and quickly set up his tent. Then, he fetched water from a nearby stream and began cooking dinner on the shore. It was homemade pasta. While cooking, he used binoculars to scan the opposite mountain for goats but saw none. After enjoying his dinner, he planned to rest early to start a busy day with the first light of dawn. The next day, Mike searched for the elusive goats but found none. He then decided to climb the mountain in hopes of spotting them up close. Goats are among the hardest animals to hunt, and just the thought of climbing the steep snow-covered mountain gave Mike a headache. He painstakingly climbed, leaving clear footprints in the snow, marking human presence in the wilderness once again. Midway up the slope, he rested and scanned the area. Fortunately, several goats appeared on the mountaintop. To approach them, Mike resumed his climb, but changed into a white coat and donned a goat-like hat to disguise himself. When he reached the summit, a male goat curiously looked at him. Just as Mike raised his rifle, the goat sensed danger and left. It seemed unsuitable to continue hunting for the day, so he decided to head back to camp before dark. Here is a steep snow-capped mountain in Alaska, where a hunter in a white coat and a goat hat quietly waits. A family of goats is approaching him. After failing to hunt yesterday, Mike returned to this mountain early today, and was in luck as several goats appeared in his sight. He estimated they would be within shooting range in about 15 minutes, so he lay down to wait. This was a test of patience. His breathing steadied, blending him into the surroundings. Soon, the lead goat, large and strong, came into view. Mike stayed still, as it was not his target. Eventually, other goats strutted out, including the one Mike was aiming for, which conveniently stopped. Seizing the moment, Mike decisively pulled the trigger. The gunshot broke the silence, and the goat ran wildly in pain before collapsing from the severe injury. Mike approached slowly, as the other goats had already vanished. The scene was left with just the dead young male goat, whose meat was tender and the best choice for this hunt. Its death wouldn't affect the herd's breeding. Understanding sustainable hunting, Mike shook the goat's head to drain blood from its mouth before starting to butcher it. The goat provided 50 pounds of meat, enough to sustain him through the long winter. He packed the meat into his backpack, tying the fur and head on the outside. After ensuring he left nothing behind, Mike began his descent, a treacherous task especially with the added weight, making it easy to slip. The descent started smoothly, but he soon faced a cliff, indicating a mistake in his route choice. With daylight fading, there was no turning back. He tied a rope to a small tree and carefully climbed down by pulling on the rope, safely reaching the bottom. After retrieving the rope and looking back, he felt a surge of relief. The rest of his journey had no more dangers, marking a perfect end to this hunting trip. 2 hunters hid behind rocks with several deer in front, 2 bucks fighting among them. Josh and his wife Bonnie didn't shoot immediately because they were aiming for bigger game. It was hunting season, and they planned to fill their home freezer to last through the long, cold winter. They needed 2 deer to meet their needs. Each had a target in sight, and Bonnie, the sharpshooter, took the first shot. The powerful rifle sent the bullet through the deer and into the ground behind it. Josh had only a second to prepare as the other deer panicked and fled. He kept his eyes on his target, but the deer escaped too quickly for him to shoot. The couple then checked their harvest, finding a young, well-fed buck that could provide at least 100 pounds of meat. After discussing, they decided to stay. Bonnie would butcher the deer, while Josh continued hunting with his wife's blessings, heading deeper into the wilderness. Sometime later, Josh spotted some deer on the opposite horizon. He approached stealthily, hiding in a concealed spot to scan the area. The deer were peacefully grazing. Josh aimed and fired decisively, but missed, and the deer scattered. He sighed in frustration. Meanwhile, Bonnie quickly butchered the deer, alert for predators attracted by the scent of blood, needing to work fast. Returning to Josh, he approached the deer again, luckily downwind so they couldn't smell him. Waiting quietly, a buck ran into an open area. Josh held his breath, took his shot, and the buck fell. Overjoyed, he exclaimed unintelligibly as he secured enough meat for the winter. He approached to claim his prize. This buck was larger than the first, about 6 years old and in its prime. Josh began butchering the trophy buck. Using a sharp knife, he chopped and sliced the meat, packing it into his backpack. He also saved the deer head. After packing up, Josh started his return journey. Having resolved the food issue, he could now focus on work. The cabin, his recent relocation, served as a defense post against wild animals. Built in 1885, its structure was intact, but required some repairs, especially a heat source. Josh found a solution nearby, an old homestead's remnants with a surviving fireplace. With his wife Bonnie and farm worker Mika, Josh planned to incorporate this fireplace into the cabin. They measured the fireplace and prepared to cut a matching hole in the cabin's side. Before cutting, they reinforced the walls to prevent collapse. Josh started the chainsaw and carefully cut along the marked lines, cutting the logs one by one. Using the chainsaw reminded him of his father, who died in a logging accident 5 years ago at 63, prompting Josh to handle the tool with extra care. Once the wall section was removed, the next critical step was moving the cabin. Josh brought in a forklift, lifted the cabin, and inserted 2 logs underneath. With Mika's guidance to ensure a perfect fit between the fireplace and the cabin, they slowly moved the cabin into place. During the process, a creaking sound halted them. It was too tight. Josh widened the gap for more space, then continued pushing the cabin with the forklift. This time, they achieved the desired result. However, the job wasn't done yet. They needed to repair the cabin, but a sudden snowstorm added difficulty. They collected rocks from the valley to improve the fireplace, made some cement to secure the rocks, and waited for it to set. Josh then lit a fire, and as the flames grew, so did the cabin's temperature. Finally, the cabin was ready for occupancy, allowing Josh to focus fully on protecting the cattle. This was a century-old tree that was mercilessly cut down by Eustace because it was in the wrong place. Despite the thickness of the beech tree, it couldn't withstand the sharp chainsaw. In a short time, it was deeply gashed and ultimately fell due to its top-heavy structure, knocking down other smaller trees in its final defiance. Located in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Eustace leads a self-sufficient life. He has recently rekindled his childhood dream of teaching, inspired by helping new neighbors settle in the area. He plans to pass on mountain survival skills to those in need. News of his plans has already attracted several apprentices, bringing Eustace both satisfaction and a sense of responsibility. Before their arrival, however, he had to repair the road leading into the mountains, With the help of 2 assistants, Eustace cleared the fallen tree, ensuring it was not wasted. He measured it, removed excess branches, and kept only the best part of the trunk. Using an excavator, Eustace lifted the log and placed it diagonally on the road for further cutting. They divided the log into sections, securely tied them with chains, and loaded them onto a truck. Care was needed as each section weighed several hundred pounds and could be extremely dangerous if mishandled. With the logs transported home, Eustace next addressed the tree stump. He dug around it with the excavator, dumping soil on the side of a nearby cliff to widen the mountain road. Alternating between an excavator and a bulldozer, the road visibly took shape. Concerned about flash flooding, Eustace dug a trench on the inside of the road to facilitate quick water runoff. To prevent the road from becoming muddy, he planned for the water to flow underneath through a large pipe buried beneath the road, ensuring it would drain onto the cliffside without affecting the road's structure. After laying the pipe, the excavator passed over it without causing any damage, meeting their requirements perfectly. They then used the bulldozer to level the road, satisfying Eustace. He could now officially start his wilderness training camp. This is a rare bison hide, highly valuable after tanning. Tom and Sean plan to turn it into cash by making bison leather boots, selling for $200 a pair, with this hide yielding at least 10 pairs. The first step is to stretch the hide on a frame. Due to heart issues, Tom carries a monitor and avoids strenuous effort per his doctor's advice. Soon, they secured the hide on the frame, which was challenging as remnants of flesh and fat made it weigh about 100 pounds. Together, they propped the frame against the cabin, ready for the next step. Each wielding a scraper, they began removing the flesh and fat, essential to prevent the hide from rotting. Their scrapers, with handles made from elk antlers, utilize a technique from Native Americans, passed down for thousands of years. Initially made with stone blades, Tom now uses a sharp steel blade. Once the hide is scraped and dried, it's ready for boot making, handled by Nancy and her sister-in-law Connie. They use last year's hides. Nancy, a master at sewing, explains the process while cutting the patterns. Connie prepares beads for decorating the boots. They work and chat together, while the men outside also keep busy. Tom and his wife have settled here for 40 years, deeply loving this lifestyle and not planning to stop as long as they live. Nancy and Connie compare their work to ensure the boots match in size and continue their detailed work. Meanwhile, Tom and Sean are finishing up outside, carefully checking their work and then moving the frame inside the workshop. Tom thanks Sean for his help, which made the scraping process easier today. Later, Tom prepares a mixture of deer brain and warm water, applying it to the hide to soften it, a critical step in tanning. When Tom returns indoors, Nancy and Connie have completed a pair of boots, warm and artistically appealing, easily worth the $200. This was their fulfilling yet ordinary day. Harry and Kid are finishing a $5,000 project, a flat-bottom boat made entirely of wood. Once the boat reaches its destination, the wood can be disassembled and reassembled into a cabin. Their previous products had issues with leaks, so the brothers upgraded them by cutting grooves in each floorboard, perfectly overlapping them to solve the problem. Now that the floor assembly is complete, they move on to the next step. They apply boiled linseed oil to the wood to protect it, followed by a coat of homemade pine tar oil for waterproofing. With the flooring done, they flip the boat over to start working on the top structure. Recalling their experience transporting mules last year, they decide to learn from it and design a movable ramp in the middle of the boat. They nail several boards together for the ramp. Kid tests its sturdiness by jumping on it. Satisfied, they lower the ramp, and Kid walks on it, confirming it works as intended. Besides this feature, they innovate by adding a door on the side of the boat, a novel idea for them. They build a frame and nail boards to form the door, then install hinges to allow it to move freely. They appreciate this design, but encounter an issue when the door feels obstructed and doesn't close smoothly. Kid forces it shut, only to find a hinge broken, indicating the hinges aren't strong enough for the door. They decide to make their own oversized steel hinges using the same principles. After welding a steel hinge, they attach it under the door and secure it with thick screws. Their testing reveals a surprisingly good result with no obstructions when closing. Their work isn't done yet. They proceed to the final touches on the boat. They heat steel and hammer it into shape, bending it to form a handle, which they then attach to the boat. Harry welds a tool similar to a door, fixing it at the back with the corresponding handle. Now that the boat is completed, it's time to drag it to the riverbank. Valued at $5,000, today marks its maiden voyage. They take it very seriously, knowing that only after safely navigating the boat downstream and handing it over to the client can they earn their payment. After discussing, Kid decided to pilot the flat-bottom boat, while Harry followed in an inflatable raft. They mounted wooden paddles on the boat and set off. Winter is the calmest time of year for the Salmon River, but they remained cautious due to some rapid sections. It was the puppy's first time on a boat, and though it was excited, it also shivered in fear. Kid found the situation amusing yet manageable, as the current was relatively smooth. However, they were approaching their first rapid, making Kid serious. With nearly 20 years of boating experience, Kid wasn't worried for himself but for Harry, who was still a novice. He instructed Harry to stay close. Soon, the challenge began. Kid expertly navigated the boat, giving Harry tips along the way. Nevertheless, Harry got stuck on a rock and struggled to free the raft. Worse, water began seeping into the raft, creating an urgent situation. Harry kept calling for Kid, who was very anxious. Fortunately, Harry managed to free himself, and they quickly pulled ashore. The raft was still leaking, the water reaching Harry's ankles. They flipped the raft to find the leak and planned to seal it with tape. Before applying the tape, they dried the bottom with a lighter. The tape should hold temporarily. They refilled the raft with air and continued their journey, enjoying the beautiful scenery along the way. However, the turbulent river caused more trouble, shaking the raft and disorienting them and the dog. After a brief rest, they hit another rapid filled with rocks. The flat-bottom boat slammed heavily into a stone, prompting Kid to check for leaks. For safety, he pulled ashore, found some minor abrasions on the wooden floor, but nothing serious. They resumed their trip, which went smoothly until they reached their destination. The buyer inspected the flat-bottom boat, impressed with its functionality, and liked it a lot. The transaction was completed successfully. A massive moose stood just 100 meters from the hunter, but it was safe. Jake, who had already stocked up on meat for the winter, was out on a mission to spot a cougar. As a lion hunter, he was responsible for driving away cougars that ventured into ranches. To quickly locate the lion, Jake released Marin, the most experienced hunting dog in his pack, known for its keen sense of smell. As Marin ran and sniffed the air, it seemed to catch a scent. Jake followed but found nothing. Jake had just received a call from a rancher reporting signs of coyotes on his property. Not only cougars, but coyotes also posed a threat to the ranch's safety. Coyotes are cunning and not easy to capture. Soon, Jake spotted fresh coyote tracks and decided to set a trap. He prepared wires that had been boiled and waxed to remove human scent. He tied the wire to a small tree and designed a loop on the animal path that would tighten around a coyote's neck as it struggled. Jake knew he needed to leave quickly to avoid leaving more scent. He found another strategic spot along a coyote's path and set up another trap in the same manner. However, waiting passively wasn't Jake's style. He preferred to take action, especially during dusk when coyotes went hunting. If lucky, he might encounter one. Armed and ready, Jake set off. As he walked, he suddenly crouched. A coyote was about 100 yards ahead. Jake didn't shoot immediately due to the strong wind masking his scent, allowing him to get closer. Once near, he mimicked a coyote's call. Alert, the coyote ran off. Jake fired a shot but missed. He tried for a second shot, but the coyote was already sprinting, making a hit nearly impossible. Jake let out a frustrated cry, knowing there was a $100 reward for each coyote killed, so he reluctantly continued the chase. Unexpectedly, he stumbled upon a deer carcass, evidently killed by coyotes. No wonder they frequented this area. The deer was not yet fully consumed. Night quickly fell as Jake continued his search for the coyote. He crouched on high ground, mimicking the call of an injured animal. Soon, a coyote appeared in his view. Jake waited for an opportunity, and as the coyote paused, he decisively took the shot and brought it down. Approaching the fallen coyote, Jake confirmed it was dead and prepared to collect the bounty. Martha had acquired a compact 8-wheeled vehicle at a very low price, potentially a valuable addition to their work tools. Martha and her daughter Ellie, designated hunters of their tribe, relied on hunting to provide meat for their community. The vehicle, capable of traversing land, marsh, and snow, was driven into the garage by Martha for some adjustments. They intended to inspect the vehicle's tracks to ensure they were correctly aligned. Martha slowly reversed the vehicle until the first wheel was in place, then sped up and stopped at the end of the track. Everything seemed fine. They rolled up the tracks and fitted them onto the wheels, securing them into a closed loop with a rod. The same process was applied to the other wheel, but they encountered an issue with the track being slightly short. To resolve this, they used a ratchet to increase tension. By fitting the ratchet strap around the track and tightening it, they ensured the track clung tightly to the wheels, achieving the necessary fixation. Now transformed into a snowmobile, they decided to test it out. The vehicle smoothly drifted and turned as Martha drove it out of the garage, finding it easy to control. She took it for a challenge through the forest on mountainous paths. With a top speed of 20 miles per hour, even thick snow couldn't stop it. Martha was thrilled. With this vehicle, they could reach any part of the wilderness. However, their joy was short-lived. As the vehicle attempted an uphill climb, the wheels began to slip, and they were stuck. Martha frowned slightly and asked Ellie to check, who discovered that the tracks had loosened, reducing friction. Martha took out an inflation device and began inflating the tires one by one. Once the tires were fully inflated, the tracks tightened naturally, solving the problem. The vehicle resumed its journey. With this hunting machine, they were now able to venture deeper into the wilderness. Dubbed a mini-tank, it functioned much like one, minus the cannon, effortlessly navigating all terrains. Martha and her daughter Ellie were on their way to a hunting ground, the wilderness blanketed in white snow, appearing remarkably beautiful as if they had entered a kingdom of ice and snow. However, the roar of their 8-wheeled vehicle shattered the tranquility. Moving swiftly, yet unsteadily, they were fascinated, but a potential crisis awaited them ahead. A riverbed not fully frozen. The two stopped to assess the risk. They noticed some fractures along the creek's bank, a dangerous area where the vehicle could get stuck and be difficult to recover. Martha planned a route, and for safety, asked Ellie to stay on the opposite bank while she drove across. After accelerating, the vehicle quickly headed towards the other side, but struggled with insufficient power and got stuck on a slope. Martha pressed the accelerator hard and finally managed to get the vehicle up the slope. Ellie watched happily as the vehicle proved its worth, continuing its journey toward the new hunting ground. Soon, snowflakes began to fall, and they stopped again as they noticed moose tracks in the snow, likely from moose coming to drink from the creek. This confirmed they were heading in the right direction, entering the realm of the moose. Moose, territorial and large creatures, tend to stay within their home range. More signs were visible in the brush. The moose had been eating the tree bark, further evidence that some moose lived here. They proceeded deeper into the forest, following information from the tribal elders about a valley deeper in the area, known as the moose's home. Since they had enough food for the winter, they decided not to hunt moose today, but to mark the area for next autumn's hunting season. However, the terrain became more challenging, testing the limits of their vehicle. With some effort, they eventually climbed to a small hill overlooking the legendary valley, driving and observing their surroundings. Suddenly, Ellie shouted in excitement as she spotted a moose. To avoid startling it, they turned off the engine. It was an adult female, looking beautiful and healthy, a good sign that the valley was indeed an ideal habitat for moose. Satisfied, they returned home. Several American bison were frantically running and damaged a section of the fence, escaping from the ranch into the wilderness. Josh found this strange because the fence was electrified, which normally kept the herd from approaching. He didn't know how many bison had escaped. Deep in this rugged terrain, wild bison herds still roamed, and if the ranch bison found them, reverting to their wild state could happen in an instant. Therefore, Josh needed to quickly repair the fence and retrieve the lost bison. Just then, another bison tried to sneak away, but was caught by Josh and herded back into the ranch. Meanwhile, a group of wild bison outside followed Josh's command and obediently returned to the ranch. After 4 years of managing this ranch, the bison had already submitted to his authority. With a stern look, Josh made the bison so frightened that they hurried back through the gap into the ranch, creating a chaotic scene. One panicked bison crashed into the fence, tumbling over, but quickly stood up and ran off when it saw Josh approaching. Although the bison were all back inside, they further damaged the fence. Josh began repairs, straightening the bent posts. While busy, He noticed fresh coyote tracks in the snow. He had found the culprits. It was the coyotes that had caused the chaos among the herd. After fixing the fence, he planned to deal with these coyotes. Josh patrolled around the ranch, looking for signs of the coyote. Soon, he spotted several tracks indicating a coyote invasion. He stopped the vehicle, loaded some tools into his backpack, and headed towards the coyote's direction. He entered a dense thicket, a favorite spot for coyotes. Josh prepared to set traps along the animal paths. He first smeared bait on branches and then arranged wire into a noose that could catch a coyote by the neck. Continuing to scout the terrain, Josh found another suitable spot for a trap. He set a leg-hold trap on the ground, covered it with mud, and then camouflaged it with snow, making it look very natural. Afterwards, Josh continued patrolling until he suddenly stopped and frantically pulled out his gun. There was a coyote on the opposite hillside. Josh lay down to aim, but felt the distance was too far. He tried mimicking a coyote's call, but the coyote on the hill did not react. Left with no choice, Josh fired his gun and, as a top hunter, hit his target directly. He approached to check and found it was an adult female coyote that had already stopped breathing. Josh grabbed its hind legs and hoisted it onto his back, noting blood dripping from its mouth. He went to a nearby tree and quickly skinned the coyote. The pelt had another use. Josh fashioned a circle with branches and combined several circles to simulate the form of a coyote, draping the pelt over them. He then hung it on a bush and connected it with a rope, making it appear as a coyote with its rear end swaying by pulling the rope. Josh hid in a concealed spot, occasionally mimicking a coyote's call. This technique, known as the she-wolf's lure, proved effective. Before long, a handsome male coyote came running quickly towards the decoy. Josh raised his gun, and when the coyote paused, he decisively shot. The coyote staggered and fell to the ground. Josh slowly approached and found the large coyote, likely an alpha male. Capturing 2 coyotes in one day was a significant moment for the ranch's safety. However, the conflict between humans and coyotes was far from over. As long as the ranch existed, the clashes would inevitably continue. As the sun rose, the wind and mountains heralded a new day. Josh began his daily routine check of the ranch, home to over 600 American bison. Due to the large scale, relying solely on fences for protection was not foolproof, necessitating constant patrols by Josh. Sure enough, he found a section of the fence that had been damaged, through which bison had escaped. In the distance, a bison was wandering outside. Josh attempted to herd it back to the ranch, but the bull's tail was raised high, a sign of anger. Knowing bison are temperamental, Josh carefully followed in his vehicle without exerting too much pressure, watching as the bison entered the ranch. He quickly repaired the fence and restored the electric current. Now, he needed to locate the other missing cattle. Clear footprints in the snow directed his way forward. After all, each bison was worth $3,000, and Josh could not afford such losses. As he grew increasingly anxious, he finally spotted several bison that had stealthily made their way to the feeding area. Now, Josh had to drive them back to the ranch. Do you know how dangerous bulls in mating season can be? They seize every opportunity, regardless of whether the opponent is another bull. Despite the bison's aggressive nature, Josh bravely drove behind them. Seeing the bulls start to run, Josh drove while continuously honking to guide their direction. Unfortunately, some of the bison were stubborn. Losing patience, Josh took out a handgun and fired 2 shots into the ground, startling the bison into changing their course. Because American bison still retain their primitive instincts, they respect the concept of following the strongest. As the guardian of the ranch, Josh had to make these bison submit to him from the heart. Under his firm control, the bison obediently returned to the edge of the ranch. Josh walked over, opened the gate, and with a command, the bison hurried back into the ranch. Josh couldn't help but let out a victorious laugh. Afterward, he secured the gate again and continued his patrol. His patrol also included another task, checking the health of the herd. Josh drove through the middle of the bison, causing some displeasure among them, but they dared not express their anger. Josh did this to better observe the condition of the herd, as raising bison is challenging. A contagious disease could lead to mass deaths, so detecting any illness early could nip the threat in the bud. Thus, Josh always diligently observed the herd. Over the years, he had developed a keen eye for detecting health issues in bison, like the bull in front of him whose back legs seemed stiff, likely bullied by other bulls. Hearing a rumbling warning sound from the bull, Josh backed off to avoid causing a disturbance. The herd here looked healthy, so he decided to check other areas. Soon, he found a solitary bison looking very weak. Josh got out of his vehicle to examine it. The bison was emaciated and alone, likely to die from illness or fall prey to predators, neither of which Josh wanted to see. He took some medicines from his vehicle, mixed them, and loaded them into a syringe, which he then placed into his shotgun barrel to be used like a bullet. However, before he could act, his approach startled the bison, causing it to run fiercely. As the distance between them closed, Josh cornered it against the fence and fired. The syringe was launched and injected some of the medicine. Josh walked over to check, finding that some of the medication had been successfully administered. He hoped the bison would recover its health. Over the following days, Josh would pay special attention to it,